How can a modern military disable an opponent before a single shot is ever fired? Why is today's battlefield no longer confined to land, sea, and air, but stretched into space itself and into the invisible pulses of the electromagnetic spectrum? This is the story of how warfare became a system. Not a single weapon, not a single soldier. A network of sensors, satellites, algorithms, and machines working in concert, faster than any human alone could ever move. This is modern military strategy, and to understand it, we first have to understand exactly what changed. For most of human history, warfare was decided by mass. How many soldiers, how many cannons, how many ships you could bring to a single field. The 20th century added machines to that equation: tanks, aircraft, radios. But the underlying question stayed exactly the same: who has more firepower? The 21st century asked a different question entirely: who understands the battlefield first? Today, satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers overhead capture imagery of terrain and movement in near real time. Unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, loiter silently for hours, feeding video to analysts thousands of miles away. Sensor networks on the ground detect vibration, heat, and motion, quietly building a picture no single human eye could ever assemble alone. All of this data converges into command centers, where artificial intelligence tools help filter noise from signal, flagging patterns, suggesting priorities, and compressing hours of analysis into seconds. This isn't science fiction happening someday, it's already routine. About 52% of defense organizations use AI today for predictive maintenance, and 44% use it to detect and deter security intrusions. And it's worth being precise here. Senior military leaders have been consistent on one point. They describe AI as a means to improve the speed and effectiveness of human decision-making, not as a replacement for human judgment. This is why modern militaries talk less about firepower and more about something called information superiority. The ability to see the situation clearly, understand it faster than your opponent, and act on that understanding before the moment passes. Because in modern warfare, the side that decides first often wins before the side that hits hardest ever gets the chance. Imagine trying to solve a complex puzzle using only one piece, over and over again. That's exactly what warfare looks like when a single branch of the military tries to operate alone. Infantry can hold ground, but they're vulnerable without support. Armored vehicles can punch through defenses, but they're exposed without infantry protecting their flanks. Artillery can strike from a distance, but it's effectively blind without reconnaissance to find the right target. Attack helicopters and air power can dominate the sky above a battlefield, but they need ground forces to translate that air dominance into actual control of territory below. This is the idea behind combined arms warfare, the doctrine of deliberately blending different military capabilities so that each branch compensates for the weaknesses of the others. The concept itself isn't new. Military historians trace the emergence of modern combined arms practice to changes on the battlefield as early as late 1917, more than a century of continuous evolution, not a recent invention born of new technology. In the Second World War, German forces demonstrated how tanks, motorized infantry, and air support, all moving together rather than separately, could overwhelm defenses that were prepared for a slower, more traditional style of attack. Decades later, in the 1991 Gulf War, coalition forces paired precision airstrikes with rapid armored maneuvers and real-time reconnaissance, compressing a war that some analysts expected to last months into a matter of weeks. What changed between those two eras wasn't the basic logic. It was the speed and precision of coordination. Modern combined arms operations now integrate unmanned drones for reconnaissance, real-time data links between units, and intelligence analysts feeding information directly to commanders on the move, compressing decision cycles that once took hours into minutes. The lesson is consistent across a full century of military history. No modern force fights effectively alone. Strength today comes from integration, not from any single weapon, however powerful, but from how well an army's different capabilities are woven together into one coordinated whole. If open terrain is a chessboard, a city is a maze that keeps quietly rearranging itself. Modern cities present a uniquely difficult environment for any military operation. Dense clusters of buildings, break sightlines and interfere with radio signals. Narrow streets funnel any movement into predictable, exposed corridors with little room to maneuver. And beneath the surface, subway systems, utility tunnels, and basements create an entire second hidden layer of terrain, one that satellite imagery simply cannot see into at all. Then there's the human factor, and it may be the most important one. Cities are home to civilian populations, which means every single decision carries a weight and complexity that open-field warfare simply does not have. Distinguishing genuine threats from ordinary bystanders, protecting infrastructure like hospitals and water systems, and maintaining any semblance of order all become immense strategic and ethical challenges at once. Modern technology adds new layers of complexity on top of that. Small commercial drones, the exact kind available to any ordinary consumer, can be repurposed for surveillance. Civilian security cameras and smartphones create a constant, uncontrollable stream of observation that no force can fully predict or manage. Logistics also become exponentially harder to manage in urban environments. Supply lines that would move freely across open terrain must instead navigate through contested, unpredictable city blocks, often making resupply one of the single hardest problems commanders face. Historically, from the reconstruction of European cities after the Second World War to more recent urban operations, militaries have had to relearn, again and again, that fighting in cities cannot be approached the same way as fighting across open terrain. It demands entirely different training, different technology, and above everything else, extraordinary caution. Not every battle is fought with weapons anyone can actually see. Some of the most consequential engagements in modern warfare happen entirely within an invisible layer of reality: the electromagnetic spectrum. Electronic warfare is the practice of using this spectrum to gain advantage, or to deny that same advantage to an opponent. At its core, it involves a few conceptual pillars. Radar jamming involves overwhelming or confusing radar systems so they can no longer reliably detect aircraft, ships, or missiles. Communications disruption targets the radio and data links that forces depend on to coordinate with one another, because a unit that cannot communicate is a unit that cannot cooperate. And on the defensive side, electronic protection involves hardening a force's own systems against these same disruptions, so commanders can maintain contact with their forces even under active interference. There's also signals intelligence, the practice of intercepting and analyzing electronic transmissions to understand an adversary's activity and intentions, much like eavesdropping on a conversation happening in an invisible language. And GPS interference, once treated as a rare and exotic threat, has become an increasingly mainstream concern. The numbers make the shift concrete. Reported GPS spoofing incidents doubled industry-wide in a single year. During the opening months of one recent regional conflict, more than 1,700 separate GPS interference events were logged, affecting hundreds of vessels at sea. And European aviation authorities reported that roughly 123,000 flights were affected by navigational interference in just the first 4 months alone. This is not a future threat, and it is not science fiction. It is happening right now. Together, these techniques form what militaries now call electromagnetic spectrum operations, the deliberate effort to control this invisible battle space, the same way one might try to control the open sky or the open sea. The history of electronic warfare stretches all the way back to the Second World War, when radar itself was a revolutionary new tool, and early efforts to jam or deceive enemy radar systems were already quietly underway. Today, the same fundamental principles apply, just executed with vastly more sophisticated technology than anyone in that era could have imagined. It's a domain most people never see and few fully understand, but it may be one of the single most consequential factors in whether a modern military can operate effectively at all. For most of military history, land, sea, and air were treated as entirely separate arenas, each with its own branch, its own doctrine, its own commanders, answering to their own chain of command. Multi-domain operations represent a fundamental shift in that thinking. Modern militaries now conceptualize warfare across 5 interconnected domains: land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. The core idea is straightforward to state, even if it's difficult to execute. These domains no longer function in isolation from one another. They reinforce each other, and they depend on each other. Consider a simplified, conceptual flow of how information might move through such a system. A satellite in orbit observes a region of interest. That imagery is processed by artificial intelligence tools, which help identify patterns and points of relevance far faster than any human analyst working alone ever could. That analysis might direct a reconnaissance drone to gather closer, real-time observation of the same area. The drone feeds its findings back to a command center where human decision-makers evaluate the full picture in front of them. From there, any necessary coordination, logistics, positioning, timing is organized. And finally, that coordinated understanding informs exactly how ground forces maneuver and respond. This is a conceptual illustration only. Real command structures are far more complex, layered with human judgment and oversight at every single stage. Space has become a domain in its own right, because so much of modern communication, navigation, and observation now depends entirely on satellite infrastructure. Cyberspace has become a domain because modern militaries, like modern societies more broadly, run on interconnected digital networks that must be defended, understood, and in some cases actively contested. Even inside the defense profession itself, this doctrine generates real documented confusion. One well-known observation among defense analysts compares multi-domain operations to a subject everyone discusses constantly, but very few can clearly define. The strategic logic, though, is simple enough to state, even if it's enormously difficult to execute in practice. No single domain wins a modern conflict on its own. If the last generation of military transformation was about connecting sensors to shooters, the next generation is about something far more fundamental. How much of the actual decision-making gets shared between humans and machines? This is already happening. The US military has conducted large-scale drone swarm exercises involving more than 200 drones working together in a single coordinated formation, adjusting in real time the way a flock of birds shifts mid-flight. Autonomous ground and underwater systems are being actively developed and tested by militaries and defense researchers around the world, aimed squarely at reducing risk to human personnel operating in dangerous environments. Directed energy technologies, including high-powered lasers, are in active research and limited deployment right now, not in some distant future. In 2026, the Pentagon began deploying laser and microwave counter-drone systems at 5 separate US military bases as part of a federal pilot program, with major new contracts awarded to expand that technology even further in the years ahead. On the ground, the US Army has begun testing robotic combat vehicles teamed directly alongside airborne infantry units, working toward a goal its own leadership describes in refreshingly simple terms: reducing the risk soldiers face on first contact with an enemy by letting machines absorb some of that risk instead of people. Space-based capabilities continue to expand year over year, with growing reliance on satellite constellations for communication, navigation, and observation alike. Perhaps the most important emerging concept of all is human-machine teaming. The idea that future military effectiveness won't come from machines simply replacing humans, but from thoughtfully designed collaboration between the two, where machines handle scale and speed, and humans retain judgment, context, and final authority. None of this is science fiction. It is active research, ongoing testing, and incremental deployment, the actual foundation of whatever comes next. We began by asking how a modern military might gain the advantage before a single shot is ever fired, and why today's battlefield stretches so far beyond land, sea, and air. The answer, as we've now seen, isn't found in any single weapon or piece of technology. It's found in integration. Combined arms warfare teaches us that no branch of a military ever succeeds entirely alone. Urban warfare reminds us that terrain and civilian life complicate even the most advanced strategies imaginable. Electronic warfare reveals an entire invisible battle space that most of us never even think about. And multi-domain operations tie land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace together into a single coordinated system. Modern military effectiveness increasingly comes down to just a few core principles: information superiority, situational awareness, cross-domain coordination, technology integration, and ultimately, speed of decision-making. Because in the modern era, being first to understand a situation often matters more than being first to strike at it. As artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, and space-based technology continue to reshape what's possible, one question becomes more relevant with every passing year. As machines take on more and more of the battlefield's complexity, what should remain uniquely, irreplaceably human? Let us know what you think in the comments below.